With the discussions of 6v6 being prominent again, the discussion of tank role has become a topic of interest as of late. And I kind of just want to give my opinions on 5v5 and why it's kind of miserable as a tank, just speaking from my experience as a dirty Diamond 2 tank. But before I get into all the negatives, I do want to say the one big positive that 5v5 tank has. I believe 5v5 tank has the highest highs of any role inside of Overwatch. When you're doing well, when you're doing good, when you're having fun, there's no other role that matches the amount of fun you're having as a dominating tank. When everything's just going your way, no counters can stop you, you're just mowing everybody down, you're holding it down, your team's winning fights, the team synergy is just flowing. As a tank, that just feels so great in 5v5 compared to any other role in my opinion. I don't think my heart's ever been pumping more than just dominating as Junker Queen, dominating as Mauga, just stomping at everyone, axing at everybody. I can't imagine how great it feels on Doomfist or Ball, just running through a lobby. And those kind of dopamine spikes just don't happen on support, and it doesn't get as high on damage, at least in my opinion. With all that said, the lows of 5v5 tank are more frequent and are lower than any other role. Tank is the only role where you can win 8 games in a row, and then one game where you lose, you feel like genuine shit because you know there's more that you could have done, but there's just so much to keep up with that sometimes you don't perform, and the other players on your team make sure to let you know. I genuinely think the worst part about 5v5 tank is just the social aspect and your own teammates. You absorb so much blame as a tank inside of 5v5 because you're the only tank, so you're the one that's easiest to blame. You are the scapegoat. And honestly, I don't blame tanks that turn off their chat. It gets really bad sometimes. There is times when you have legitimately bad games. Nobody is perfect. You're going to be playing bad sometimes, and you're just getting absolutely ridiculed in the chat by people that aren't even doing that well. It's like as a tank, you're not allowed to have a bad game. The DPS are allowed to have a bad game. The support's allowed to have a bad game. They also have someone else to pick up their slack. As a tank, you have no one to pick up your slack. It's just you. So if you're having a bad game, not only do you have that feeling of you know you're doing bad, you have 4 other motherfuckers in chat yelling at you saying how bad you're doing. It just makes for a genuinely miserable experience when you know you're doing bad and then you get that confirmation in chat that you are doing bad. And then these messages, they're not nice. They're like, okay, tank, can you like pick it up? It's literally calling you retarded, calling you stupid, saying you got your brain leaking out of your ears and you only lost a single team fight. Or you lose a single team fight and someone in chat just says GG. But that goes for any role. People are so cruel towards tank that it makes nobody want to pick up the role. The role is already the least popular role in the game. And when you discourage so many people from picking up the role by just flaming your tank immediately, it's going to make new players not want to play tank. They're going to play DPS, they're going to play support, they're not going to pick up tank, the role that needs more players. Especially if we switch to a 6v6 format, we are going to need to double the tank population, and that's just not going to happen, especially with how the community treats tanks and just this toxic culture against tanks and blaming tanks instead of looking at yourself. It will always be the DPS that are doing bad that are flaming the tank instead of looking at what they could do differently themselves. It doesn't help that so many tanks are looked down upon as well. Doomfist, Wrecking Ball, Mauga, Roadhog, Zarya. Like, you are not allowed to play these tanks without getting flamed for just picking those characters where no other role really has that problem. Mercy has that problem. That might be it. Maybe Sombra for damage, which leaves you with only half the tank cast that's socially acceptable to play. And a lot of players don't want to play around a Doomfist. They don't want to play around a Wrecking Ball. They want to play the heroes that they want to play and not necessarily play with their team. That's not saying you have to play with your team every match, but these are also the same players that are extremely toxic and that will blame the tank even though they're the ones not helping the tank to begin with. And this isn't to say that every loss isn't the tank's fault. There is a lot of losses where the tank is at fault. And some tank players do genuinely develop an ego because they think they're better than a lot of other people, or that you should be thanking them for picking up the role in the first place. But that's not every single match, especially with how many times tanks get flamed. Like, you'll be on support, you'll see your DPS flaming your tank. You're like, why are you flaming the tank? Like, this is your fault and you're blaming someone else. And then the tank does well the next round and then it's the support's fault, or it's the other DPS's fault, and it is never their fault. That's just the problem with the scoreboard in general, is that it shows a very limited picture of what's actually going on. It doesn't show how many people you saved as a tank. It doesn't show how much damage you blocked off, how many ults you stopped. It only shows your damage, your kills, your deaths, and your mitigation, when inside of a game of Overwatch, there's so much more that is going on, especially with the tank role that just isn't displayed there. Especially if you're holding down a certain area, because you're not necessarily getting elims, or you're getting kills, or maybe not even damage. damage, but you're able to hold off the enemy and stop certain attacks, which is something that just isn't displayed. 5v5 tank also just absorbs all the damage. You're the biggest target. You're arguably the strongest target on the battlefield. You're going to absorb the most CC. You're going to absorb the most damage. It's just not fun getting slept, antied, and killed within 3 seconds as a tank. And if you do well, if you did stomp the enemy team in a first fight or a second fight and you're holding space really good, you know what's going to happen? If you're playing Monkey, Reaper, Bastion, and Hog are going to come right out that spawn door. You dominate a team as Mauga, here comes Sigma, Ana, and Zen. The problem with Counterwatch is that it's not just the tank that swaps, it's every role that swaps. And tank is the role that gets countered the most. If there's a dominating Genji, a dominating Widow, yeah, other players are going to switch in order to counter those heroes. But I would say 70% of the time, 80% of the time, it is tank that gets countered hard. And it's just not fun to play as tank. You have one winning fight and suddenly you're playing against 3 hard counters and you're blowing up. And then you're like, all right, maybe I'm going to give this a second try. You blow up again, or you're just legitimately struggling and your teammates refuse to help you out. They refuse to switch their characters because they want to play their characters, but they see you getting countered, so instead you're going to absorb all the blame. In some matches, it's just mystery heroes. Like, you come out as Winston, they go Hog. You go Mauga, they go Sigma. And it's like this never-ending cycle of just switching heroes to counter the enemy tank. And it doesn't help that there's this expectation by certain players and certain teammates that tank is just supposed to handle every inconvenience that is happening. What's not helpful is when people say make space. Make space is not a clear statement. Getting picks is a clear statement. Supporting your team is a clear statement, right? Support can be healing your team, making sure your team is up, and securing kills. When you say make space, there's a lot more nuance to that. It doesn't necessarily mean just pushing mid, pressing W like how Flats or other streamers would say, like, just go tank, push W and you win the fight. People take that too literal, especially newer players who are picking up the role for the first time. Making space means different things to different people. A new player hears that, they just push mid, they slam in the middle, they're doing a bunch of damage. This is what they've been told to do, right? They've been told to make space. They believe that they're making space, and then they get flamed in chat for it, and it makes the role so unwelcoming. Is there a Widow dominating your lobby? Well, it's up to you to go Winston or Diva to take care of that Widow, and then you open up your team to getting attacked by the enemy tank because you have to deal with a Widow now. And then if there's a Tracer just shredding through your team, you have to take care of the Tracer now too because your other teammates can't do that. Meanwhile, the enemy tank is able to wreak havoc because you're preoccupied on other issues your team can't handle, and you're also expected to handle the other tank. And yes, I am aware team diffs exist, right? It's not just the tank's fault, it's everybody's fault. The DPS are doing bad, the tank's doing bad, the supports are doing bad. But every time there's a team diff, it's usually the tank that takes most of the blame. How I like to view tank in 5v5 is that you're the equivalent of a quarterback. Your supports are your O-line, and your damage are your receivers. Winning or losing is on you a lot of the time, but also if you're getting sacked, if your O-line's just crumbling immediately and they're getting picked right away, how are you expected to make any plays when your O-line's just falling apart? And if you are getting sacked, it could be because you're putting yourself in that position, you're hesitating on certain plays, resulting in a sack. And if your DPS are going out there and just missing catches or not making themselves open, what are you as a quarterback supposed to do? There's only so much you can do. You and your supports can be playing great, but if your DPS are just losing every 1v1, they're not winning any single fights, it's really hard to win a match when it's only your team getting killed, or when it's your team getting picked first. A lot of people like to say that in 5v5, when a tank dies, the fight's instantly lost. But I feel like the fight's kind of lost depending on the first team to get picked. If your BAP gets picked off immediately, that's a lost fight. Like, it's going to be really hard to make up for that BAP. Maybe DPS, it's not as bad because the other DPS can help pick up, or you could help even that playing field more quickly than if you were to lose a support. But if you lose a support, the fight it's very hard to win. And yes, if your tank dies immediately, that is the hardest role to make up. You're most likely losing the fight. But that doesn't really happen as much as people like to make it out to be. It's usually a support or damage that gets picked off immediately, and more times than not, it's going to be that team that loses the team fight. Switching to a 6v6 format can help some of these issues. It helps the blame, it helps Counterwatch, but again, I think the true problem with 6v6 is just the queue times. You're not going to get enough tank players, especially with the negative stigma around tank that is constantly being promoted. If you want to see my full video on 6v6 and why I don't think it'll work, I'll link it right here, but it just doesn't help in 5v5 how negative people are towards tanks and just how much blame they absorb, and they don't really really get that much help. Ban phases for tank is so crucial inside of Overwatch, inside of 5v5. Like, you should almost always be banning around tank and around map. But a lot of players, at least in my rank, like maybe 60% of the time I'll get people that follow my lead with my hero ban votes. But a lot of times people just don't vote at all, or they vote for who they find annoying. If I'm playing Mauga and I don't get Ana, Sigma, or Diva banned, I'm gonna struggle a lot. If you're playing Doom and you can't get Sombra, Hog, Orisa banned, you're going to struggle. As much as I don't like hero bans, they are crucial for the tank experience, especially with how hard tanks get countered every single match. And you know, I take in the defense of tanks a lot in this video, but there is also things that tank players can do to make themselves less insufferable. Like Doomfist players, they're like the Genji players, the DPS. They think they're better than every other tank player. They think that their team should always be playing around them, and that's just not how things work inside of Overwatch. You can't expect your team to go full dive every single time. You do have to adapt as a tank player. You can't just play who you want to play and expect to win, or expect not to get flamed to an extent. It's not just Doom players. I'm just using that as an example. Reinhardt's also a tank that's mained a lot and that people don't like to swap off of, even if they're going up a really bad matchup or if they're in a map that does not favor Ryan. But the amount of hate that these players receive compared to DPS that refuse to swap is night and day. I think there's a lot of things that need to change with tank inside of Overwatch. I don't think 6v6 is going to completely save the tank role. It's not. We've seen in Overwatch 1, 6v6 tank was not popular. It's not going to be any different inside of Overwatch 2. I think Blizzard just needs to reevaluate the tank role and what they do and tweak their abilities again to make the role more desirable and less dependable on tanks. But that's going to take a lot of resources, a lot of experiments for something that might not even work, or maybe even put us in a worse position than we're currently in. I think a lot of people just need to be nicer to tank players in general. They get so much hate. The community has so much bad emotions towards tank that I think if they just tone that down a little bit and make the tank role more welcoming, queue times could improve across the board, and maybe 6v6 can be a reality where 2-2-2 role queue can be implemented without horrible queue times. Anyway, that's just my feelings towards tank, towards 5v5 tank. Do you guys think I'm wrong? Do you agree with me? Let me know what you like about 5v5 tank and what you don't like about 5v5 tank, and if you do prefer or don't prefer 6v6. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing, and I will see you guys in the next one.